back to the Erin Dungarees Sewalong, supported by Janome. If you're just catching up, you can find the full sew-along at tillyandthebuttons.com/Erin. In this video, we're continuing to assemble the bib of our dungarees. Let's start by making the straps. You'll need 4 strap pieces if you're making the shoulder tie version, or 2 strap pieces for the buttonhole version. Fold each strap lengthways, right sides together, and press the fold. Pin together the long raw edges. We're going to sew across one short end, starting at the fold, pivoting at the corner, then up the long edge, leaving the other short end unstitched. Sewing machines love sucking narrow pieces like this under the needle plate, so if you find that happens, don't worry, pull it out, unpick any knots and then start again, this time starting a little way in from the edge. Then you can sew back over the gap at the end, starting from the other direction. So we're going to sew across one short end first, stopping 15mm or 5/8 of an inch before the raw edge. Keep your needle down to keep your project in place. Raise your presser foot and then pivot the strap so the long edge is pointing towards you. Lower the presser foot and then sew up the long edge, back tacking just before the end. Remember to leave the other short edge unstitched. If you're using an overlocker, you can simply overlock one seam at a time rather than pivoting at the edge. If you used a regular sewing machine, trim and grade the seam allowances. Remember, grading means trimming down the seam allowances to different widths to cut down on bulk. Snip diagonally across the corners at each short stitched edge, taking care not to cut through the stitches. Now we're going to turn the straps right sides out. You can either use a blunt knitting needle, chopstick or something similar. Hold the stitched short end of the strap against the blunt end and smoosh it over. It can be a bit fiddly, but hang in there. Eventually you'll see the stitch end emerge and you can gently pull it through, which is very satisfying. It looks a bit of a mess at the moment, so let's neaten it up. First we need to tidy these corners. Carefully ease the fabric out of the corners with a pin. Be careful not to poke a hole in the fabric. Press the seam line to neaten it up. Now roll the seam line to one side and press the strap flat. If your fabric doesn't press well, you can edge stitch 2 to 3mm or 1/8 of an inch around the long sides and stitch short side to keep the strap sitting nicely. Now we're going to attach the straps to the bib. Take your back bodice, the one with the interfaced yoke, and find the strap notches a little way in from the corner's edge. Pin the 2 straps to the back bodice, the raw unstitched short ends lined up with the top of the yoke, aligning the inside of each strap with the strap notch. Using a regular sewing machine, stay stitch in place. In this context, stay stitching means sewing stitches to temporarily hold layers together before we sew them for real. You can use a longer stitch length for this, 4 to 5mm, sew 10mm or 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge so the stitches stay hidden within the seam, and start and stop a little way past each side of the strap to hold it securely. If you're making the shoulder tie version, attach the 2 remaining straps to the right side of the interfaced front yoke the same way. Turn the outer bib right sides out. and the bib lining wrong sides out. Slip the outer bib inside the bib lining so they're right sides together, with the front bib seams together. Pin the bib to the lining along the top of the front yoke and around the curved armholes, and along the top and back yoke. Start by matching the corners, side seams and notches. Remember, you're pinning 2 layers together, not 4. The strap should be sandwiched between the layers. We're going to start sewing at one of the side seams, and sew all the way around this edge, pivoting at the corners. Stitch taking care not to catch the free ends of the straps in the stitching. Pivot at the corners like you did for the straps, so stopping 15mm or 5/8 of an inch before each corner. Keep the needle down, raise the presser foot and turn the project so it's facing towards you. Lower the presser foot and continue sewing. When you get back to the place you started, you can overlap the first few stitches with the last few stitches to secure them in place. So here's what I've just sewn. You're not sewing the bottom edge of the bib just yet, so this should still be open. If you used a regular sewing machine, trim the seam allowances and snip diagonally across the corners at the top of the front and back bibs. If you're using woven fabric, clip into the armhole curves every 2 to 3 centimetres or 1 inch or so, almost up to the stitching line. You're just making little snips, being careful not to go over the stitches. This will help open out the seam allowance and help the armhole curve sit nice and flat once the bib is turned out right sides out. If you're using knit fabric, the stretch in the fabric means that you probably won't need to do this. Turn the bib right sides out and pull the straps out. You can use a pin or point turner to ease out the top corners of the front and back yokes to neaten them up into more of a point. Next, we're going to press the seams to neaten them up, rolling the seam lines slightly to the lining side. Remember when we trimmed down the lining? That was to help this seam roll on the inside. Now would be a good time to check the fit of the bib. Try it on, either tie the straps at the shoulders if you're making the tie shoulder version, or pin them at the front yoke if you're making the buttonhole version. Check you're happy with the fit of the side seams, but do bear in mind that the style of these dungarees is intentionally loose fitting. And you need to ensure that your hips fit through the top. If you do want to take the side seams in, unpick a few stitches where your bib joins the lining at the top of each side seam, then take in the side seams on both of the outer and bib lining and join them together again. So it's starting to look really nice and your Erin dungarees are coming together perfectly. So next we're going to edge stitch around the top edges and the armholes, starting at one of the side seams. So I'm starting at one of the side seams, sewing through 2 layers, not 4, edge stitching around 2 to 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch from the edge, pivoting at the corners. So once you've done your edge stitching, we're now going to press the bib to neaten everything up. So the last step for today is we're going to stay stitch the bib lining along the waistline or bottom edge to keep the layers sitting nicely when we attach the legs. So smooth everything down. If one of the layers has ended up slightly longer than the other, you can trim it down. And with the bib right sides out, pin the bib and bib lining together around the waist seam, matching the notches, the side seams and the front bib seams. You're pinning 2 layers together, not 4. Starting at one of the side seams, stay stitch 10mm or 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. You can use a longer stitch, 4 to 5mm, and don't worry about back tacking as this is just temporary. Looking good. In the next video, we'll move on to the legs and the pockets. In the meantime, let us know how you're getting on. I'd love to see your work in progress, so share with us on social media with the hashtag #SewingErin.